Alright, today it's raining, so I'm going to do a little work in the garage. And the 223 super large, a 12-inch can when it's over, 223 homemade Form 1 can. So to do this, I've got to put this in the steady in the lathe. So I had to dig around and find my little plate that's cut for the live end on the outboard side of the lathe. Barely fits into the ID of the tubing that I'm using. So I will take this to the can over. We will check it up in one end in the forejaw and on the other side in the steady rest. And then just on the outside edge of that, once everything's dialed in, I'll pull this piece out. I'll pull that little end cap out. And at that point we will cut inside threads. So I've got the compound spun around completely backwards from normal because the inside threads will be cutting outside in on the near wall. Okay, so here we've got the one end of the can chucked up in forejaw and centered up. It's resting in the steady on this end. And I had to break out the old school tools because I couldn't find a quick change tool post holder that would hang on to that particular bar. And it had the bit that I liked the best in it. This bit here. Ready to go. So what we're going to do now, next thing I got to do is I've got the carriage stop dial set up over here. I'm going to go that way from the edge about, well, I'm going to have about ½ inch of threads, and I'm going to add 1/10 of an inch for my run out zone. So I'm going to go in 6/10 of an inch on this guy, and then I'll reset this one so that it'll be my zero stop, so I can watch it instead of trying to watch up in there when I'm running that thread in. And once I get that done, then we'll cut the trench, the run out trench, which is done with the other side of the cutting edge, so it's not affecting the side of the thread cutting tool that we'll be using to actually cut the threads. So I got to puzzle out that side of it depending on which way that movement's going to be on the lathe. And then I'll set a thread stop device in the back end, actually on the back side of the clamp for the taper attachment. I made this a couple of years ago for that purpose. It normally sits on the front side and bumps into that when I'm up on my zero mark, but since we're going in the other direction today, it'll be on the back side of that, but serving the same purpose, just so I can reset the cross slide to zero before I crank in more cut on the compound. I hope all that made sense and I got it right. Okay, so I had to switch the earlier arrangement, this is old style stuff, back to a smaller boring bar with a more rigid arrangement here because that thing was just too floppy. So a lot of lessons to learn there. And you can still see remnants of the chatter that the other unit was producing, but I took the end cap off my 308 can, which really was made with the same design as this one, and fitting them together, they screw together fine. I think some of that grit in there is probably the chatter marks from the other rig, but this should be sufficient. The other can has held up to 308 well, and this one's just 223, so it shouldn't be a problem. So next time we will do the other side, the outboard end of the can. And that's just a matter of flopping the bits around and realigning everything. All right, got the can flipped around to the outboard end. So that'll be the outboard end of the can, the side the bullets come out of. I just thought I'd back up and show. I'm not going to stick it in here because it's quite a tight fit. I have to use a puller to get it loose, but this is the end cap that I use, 60-degree cut in it. I put that in, and then I put the live center in the hole in this and make sure everything is running true after centering the rear end and the forejaw. Once I've done that, then I can bring the fingers in on the steady rest and get this clamped so that it's not moving when it's spinning. So that's all set and ready to go. The larger old school tooling failed the test on me last week, so we have switched over to the phase 2 tool post, and we'll be using a smaller boring bar with the threading tip in it. I'm going to take that out and sharpen it real quick, as I'm going to take out this other side and sharpen it real quick as well. I'm going to use this end real quick to cut the relief run out cut inside this piece. I have about a 1/2 inch of threads, and I'll have maybe a 1/10 of an inch or so of run out that's cut to the same bottom diameter as the thread. And I'll do that with this, and then flip the tool around and we'll do our threading. Okay, so we've got our, it's really a threading tool, but I'm just going to use it as a inside cutting tool real quick to cut the relief cut. So what we've got to do now is get this aligned more or less. Cutting tip aligned more or less with the end, and we'll move up our index. All right, so you guys couldn't see any of that. I'll run this again from this side so we get the cutting edge, again, more or less. That doesn't want to focus on what I want it to focus on, okay. More or less even with the end of the piece. Set up our dial down here. Get it zeroed. I've already done this, so it doesn't really matter. So you zero that up. Check to make sure it's repeatable. And come in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would be in the end of our threaded area, and that makes our run out cut that we're about to make. And now what I will do is I will reset the dial indicator on the carriage so that this is now the 0 point. So basically loosen it and move it over this way and set it so that 0, so that when I'm making my plunge cuts or my cuts inside or my thread cuts, I can watch this. Although usually you can just listen to the threading, it's nice to have this here so that you see if this comes and actually moves to the 0 position, you know you're at the bottom of your cut. Okay, so that has netted us a nice little relief cut, which you can see in there now. That's cut to the single depth of the thread, about 27 thou. So again, we'll see the thread form start on this end and end right there. And just this section in here will end up being our threaded portion. So I'm going to flip the tooling around now. Here's all the swarf that came out of that operation. I'll flip the tooling around now and we can watch some of the threading happen. I'll probably just do this in high speed after maybe the first pass or so. But well, probably one of the most important things about the threading operation is to make sure that this tool, the cutting tool, is right straight into the workpiece, which I've done by truing the tool post to the lathe ways. But also I need to rotate this piece this way, because this is a round boring bar, until that top face is flat out. And I also need to make sure, sorry about that, I also need to make sure that I also need to make sure that the height of this tool is halfway up this piece so that we're cutting a proper thread form. If you go above that, obviously, you're tapering that thread form out, and if you go below that, then you're getting less. So it's important that this be oriented properly to the piece in all three of those dimensions. Okay, so a couple last minute things to do to set up before we do our threading. First is on the compound. We've made sure that's zeroed out, and I've made sure that's on the forward dial because we're going to start moving that in to make our cuts inside the inside wall. You need to make sure you've got this moving forward and at 0 so you don't have a backlash issue. I've made that mistake many times in the past. I've also reset our dial indicator so that it's ready to tell me when I have reached the plunge cut. So when this tip gets to the plunge cut, well, like I said, you'll probably hear it. And I've set up a thread stop. It's this device. It basically bumps into the base of the bolt that works on my tapering attachment, so that if I'm mindlessly cranking the cross slide, it will basically stop me at the same number each time. So I don't have to remember what that number is or how many rotations I've come off when I move out of the thread form. So what will happen is we'll pull that to our 0 position on the slide, on the cross slide. We'll then add whatever cut we want on the 29.5 degree angle using the cross slide. Then we'll make our cut using the threading handle, and that will give us 24 threads per inch because of where we have the levers on the lathe set. So that'll move in, cut some material. Oops. That'll move in, cut some material, enter the relief cut, and it'll stop the lathe with the locking nuts, half nuts, and then I'll move this out so that it's out of its cut, and we'll move it back out to the outside of the piece, come back to 0 on the cross slide, and then add some more cut on the compound, and just keep doing all of those operations until we get to the bottom of our thread form. Okay, so what I did there was I took some 3M emery, some heavier grit stuff belt a throwaway belt, and some Trizac that was kind of worn out. I just kind of polished the faces, the peaks, if you will, of this thread form a little bit, because we were right where we were supposed to be from the numbers, and the thread would start just fine, but it didn't seem to want to go. kept hanging up about a 1/16 of an inch in. So once I got the peaks back to where they ought to be, it's going to work fine. This cap's full of crud, so it doesn't want to go in there. But this is not the cap that'll live in this can. So the other one, we'll go ahead and turn that next. This is the can itself is now finished, which is nice. So I can yank it out of here, and we'll start working on end caps and blast baffles, or baffles. All right, so this is the stock we're going to be using to make the end caps as well as the primary blast baffle. And this is the piece I made for my 308 can. I'm going to scale the dimensions of this down a little bit in most every way, other than this thread is the same as the new can has. In fact, you just saw us test fit using this end cap in both ends of the other can. So that'll be duplicated at the same dimensions outside and minor diameter. This cap end will probably be duplicated the same way. So this dimension will probably be the same. This is going to get a little shorter and probably not as big around as this one was. And unlike this can, which has the threading mostly in this piece that's offset into the end cap, and is not threaded in the portion that was shrouded over the barrel. I did that because I thought I was going to put in a locking device mated to the barrels that I was going to use. Turned out not to be necessary. So I think I'm going to thread the portion of this part on the new cap, because I want that dimension to be as short as possible. I'm just making it tall enough to get a 1/2 inch wrench in there. Sorry, 3/4 inch wrench in there to get the thing on and off. Other than that, I want it as close to the AR muzzle as possible. So this piece will go away, and this wall will probably be thin.